Well, everyone, welcome to Sports Insider. I'm Dan Labbe. We've got Bud Shaw today filling in for Chris Fedor, who has been covering the Cavaliers and will be heading to Chicago today along with the rest of our Cavaliers reporting team. We're going to talk to part of that team. Joe Vardon will be joining us right off the bat. Mary Kay Cabot's going to talk draft and little Josh McCown as well, because who doesn't love talking about Josh McCown?
Absolutely.
And then Paul Hoynes will join us from Kansas City. The Indians wrap up their series there this afternoon at 2:10. So we'll talk to Paul Hoynes about that game and more with the Indians. But first, as promised, let's bring in part of our Cavaliers reporting team. He also covers LeBron James. Joe Vardon joins us. Joe, how are you?
Well, I think we should talk about Fedor a minute here. You know, he's using his playoff coverage as an excuse to skip on you guys. I know yesterday I had to be the MC for our morning shoot-around video. You know, I mean, it's he's not following along with the all-in mantra. That's for sure.
Hey, how do we know that, like J.R. Smith, he hasn't been suspended for 2 shows?
That's right. This is like the PGA Tour at cleveland.com.
They don't announce the
They don't let you know. Yeah.
Did he hit anyone in the media room last night? That's the real question. Joe, last night, LeBron James, of course, he puts the headband back on. Everyone talking about that. And then he comes out and he kind of plays like the old LeBron James. He was not as passive as what we saw in the first game. The rest of the team really seemed to feed off of that. Is that going to continue in this series? Will we see this aggressive LeBron James now for the next however long this thing goes?
Well, Dan, I think so. But there's a couple things to keep in mind. One, with about 4 minutes and 30 seconds last night, LeBron, there was a defensive rebound and the ball was heading the other way. And LeBron just didn't bother to run with his team. Like, he stood under the stanchion, you know, hands on knees. Like, I even think he might have waved. Like, I just can't do it. And David Blatt, you know, was sprinting to half court to call timeout and get him out of the game. The point being, I don't know that at an old 30 with 4 consecutive finals appearances and 43,000 minutes played, that he can sustain that kind of crazy energy for the rest of the series. Now, I think he can play like that in every game, but he's going to have to temper it a little. And the good news is that J.R. Smith's return should allow him to be able to temper that a little bit. But, you know, I asked LeBron last night, now that he's seen what he saw in Game 2 and in Game 1, if he had a beat on how this series would go, not in terms of who's going to win or not, but just how the series would be played. And he said he really did. So I think you can expect to see largely what we saw last night, but, you know, a little bit more tempered because one of his floor spacers will be back.
Joe, I think there's a stat out there that Derrick Rose is averaging like 14 points in games in which he goes in with only 1 day's rest. He had 14 again last night, didn't get to the foul line. Do you think this is a pretty ominous sign for the Bulls?
Oh, yeah, but absolutely. And it was, you know, we chuckled last night because Derrick Rose said that's just a phenomenon that the media made up. You know, the numbers are plain as day. You know, when he has a little bit of time off, as he did going into Game 1, he plays like how he played then. He was fantastic. He was a difference maker. If that was the Derrick Rose that we would get for the rest of the series, it's probably a pickup. But when he plays with 1 day rest, it's a different story. And, you know, I apologize. I don't know when Game 7 is, but I do know that from here through Game 6, there's only 1 day in between each game. And so the Bulls are going to have to compensate for a Rose who's pretty good, but not as good as he was Monday night.
How do they compensate for the lack of production they're getting out of Noah at this point?
That's another good question, Bud. And I'm sitting there watching the game, wondering why they're not going to Mirotic, and I have to believe to this point that he must not be right. You know, he got banged up in the first series, and they're just kind of trotting Noah out there, and Noah clearly isn't right. He's not himself, and they're just not getting enough from him. He's kind of killing them, really. And that's too bad for them just because he's been a glue for their team for so long. You know, Tibbs is a great coach. The one thing that he kind of does take a rap for is overusing guys, especially kind of grinding them too hard, especially when they are hurt. And it would appear through 2 games that this is a horse that, they need to back off of a bit.
Joe, they did a much better job yesterday, really as expected against Pau Gasol. He didn't get nearly as many open jumpers. How much of that is credited to moving Tristan Thompson into the starting lineup, and what else were they doing yesterday?
Well, they I don't know how much of that is actually credited to Tristan, because when Tristan was on the floor on Monday night, time and again, Pau there was no one around him. So a lot more of it has to do with changing how they defended that play. For one thing, Derrick Rose wasn't able to get, a step past his man, which was the first problem. They also got away from trying to double Derrick off of the pick and roll quite as much as they were before, which left, less space for Pau. And then the other thing is Gasol just didn't play well. For as good as he was in Game 1, he didn't play like he can or did. The Bulls just had a bad night. The Cavs were great, the Bulls were rotten, and that is, that's why I think for me, it's kind of hard to say how this series is going to go, because the Bulls were just total opposites from Game 1 to Game 2.
Joe, how concerned should Cavs fans be about Shumpert?
Well, I'm concerned because he's changed them for the better. You don't get better. Certainly losing Kevin and JR like they did, but JR's coming back, and in the meantime, Iman Shumpert, blossomed right away. He, as David Black kind of said he would, he's been able to score the ball, and he's so athletic, and he gives you so many options. Like, he gives you so much defensively, and then he can attack the rim. Getting that kind of production out of him with the return of JR and kind of like the new old LeBron, that's really good stuff. So, the question is, what do you do? How does he respond 48 hours later, to an injury like that? It was a good sign, of course, that he came back into the game right away. But, David Blatt said we need a 48-hour miracle. That's not good language for what they expect from Iman. But, Iman said it'll take multiple doctors to keep him out of the game. And but they don't just need him, they need him to be right. And so for as excited as you want to be that JR is on his way back, you have to temper that until you know what you see from what you're going to get from Iman, in games 3 and 4.
Joe, it's a weekend in Chicago. What can we expect? Where is this series going to be when it comes back to Cleveland after this weekend?
Well, let's call it 2-2, and that's giving the Bulls the benefit a little bit. The way the Cavs played last night suggests, of course, that they are still the better team in this series. Things went so poorly in Game 1, and yet the Cavs were right there in the end. And so that's not really a good sign for Chicago either. But, I'm going to give them a game, maybe this next one, because they're at home. There's going to be a certain energy there. They're going to get some things corrected. The Cavs will not start like they did last night. It'll be a tougher slog, and I think I was saying this series is going to go 7, and so that's what I think. I think you're going to see kind of another set of 2 games where you're not really sure what to make of the series, and it's going to be it's more like Game 5 is probably going to be the real determining factor as to where we're headed.
Joe, for the sake of the anti-Delhi brigade, I feel the need to point out that the guy who played the most minutes last night in a blowout win was Delhi. How much more can people expect to see of him, especially if Shumpert is hobbled?
Well, but let me first say, I privately was certainly among the anti-Delhi brigade for most of the year. just because he seemed like he was a guy who had limited skills and was playing far more important minutes than he should. But something happened in that time, and it's like the old American sports story, like that you don't think happens anymore. He worked every day extra over and over and over again and actually made himself a better player. Matthew Dellavedova is a better player now than he was when the first game, got underway on October 30th. And I don't know how often you can really say that or see that today in professional sports. He's a better spot-up shooter than he was then. And I certainly have more confidence with him, being on the perimeter and catching a pass from LeBron and knocking down that three than I did a couple months ago. So I'm okay with the minutes that he played last night. And I'm interested to see if his improved play, how much that will resonate, if he's continually called upon.
All right, Joe, thanks for the time.
Okay, guys, anytime.
Thanks, Joe.
Joe Vardon, part of our Cavaliers team. Of course, he answered the bell today.
Yeah, he did. He was there.
All right, we're going to have Mary Kay Cabot on here momentarily. But no one is really talking about this. LeBron maybe isn't going to admit it, but I'm kind of in the camp that asking LeBron to defend the four takes a lot out of him. And I think that's part of what happened in Game 1.
I'm right there with you. Now, I guess some could make the argument that asking him to chase Dunleavy around is also taxing.
Yeah.
But I just thought in Game 1, not that he admitted he could play better. I get that. But I think people ask a little too much of him. And I'm not ready to call him an old 30 yet. But to ask him to defend every guy that starts shooting well on Chicago, which they did in Game 1, and to do everything else he was doing is a lot.
All right, let's go ahead and switch gears. Let's look back on last week's NFL draft and look ahead as well for the Browns. We bring in our Browns beat reporter, Mary Kay Cabot. Mary Kay, how are you?
I'm doing great, guys. How you doing?
All right, so Mary Kay, the draft is in the books. The Browns didn't do anything spectacular. That seems to be the reviews of what happened last week. How did you feel about the Browns draft?
Well, you guys all know how I felt going into it. I still think that they should have at least made a pretty strong pitch for Marcus Mariota. And I don't think the Titans were going to part with him anyways, but, that's the thing that kind of stands out to me, that, they are not going to over-prioritize the quarterback position. So we'll see how that works out for them as we move forward here. But aside from that, I think they added a lot of, intriguing pieces. I don't know that, that you necessarily needed to get a guard/center at number 19. However, if he turns out to be your center of the future and Alex Mack leaves, coaches always say, and Eric Mancini always said, it's definitely not a sexy pick, but you have to have one. And you find out very quickly, how things can go downhill when you don't have a good center, especially with the way things are going in the zone blocking and stuff that they do on this team. So, let's see how that pans out. I think there's some other very intriguing picks. Nate Orchard, I'm very interested to see what he's all about. The only thing that concerns me a little bit is when you go from 3.5 sacks 1 year up to 18.5 the next year, you have to wonder if you're going to have that kind of production at this level. And then Duke Johnson, I got a text right away from an NFL executive saying, I love that running back. He was highly regarded in the league, so he could be very interesting. So they added a lot of bodies, and they added some guys I think that will come in and contribute. And again, like you guys said, not a flashy draft, but a solid.
Mary Kay, I have to say, I find it hilarious that they're talking about not over-prioritizing a position. The same regime a year ago traded up to get an undersized quarterback hoping to catch lightning in a bottle. Suddenly, a year later, they're not going to over-prioritize it. Isn't this just a result, or it goes along hand in hand with the fact that they couldn't get either Mariota or Bradford, and that's why they're now talking this way?
Yeah, I think so. Yes, I agree with you. And I think the only argument that they can win there would be the fact that, that they weren't willing to, give up 12, 19, next year's first rounder. But yes, now that you've got Josh McCown as a starter, which is a hard sell to these fans. It's a hard sell to season ticket holders. I've talked to a lot of season ticket holders that are canceling and not renewing their season tickets this year. I've been hearing that out on the street. But, yeah, I do think it's, okay, Josh McCown is the starter, so we are not over-prioritizing the quarterback situation. But the truth of the matter is that they did look into going after Marcus Mariota, and they did look into trading for Sam Bradford. So they do realize the importance of it, and yes, they just couldn't do anything better this year.
Mary Kay, one of the Browns' most intriguing picks, their last pick, a guy that we got to hear from the other day, Ifo Ekpre-Olomu, the cornerback out of Oregon, a guy that is coming off an ACL injury, may not be available all of next season. Who knows? You never know with those injuries. But what are the Browns hoping ultimately to get from him?
Well, we had him on a conference call yesterday, and I asked him, was this something other than the ACL? Because, you can come back in 6, 7, 8 months from a torn ACL. I mean, it didn't hurt Todd Gurley's draft status. I knew there had to be something more. So I asked him about that yesterday. He revealed that he also had a dislocated knee, and I'm sure that scared teams. So I do think that it will be a huge bonus if they can get him back on the field and get him healthy. And if they can, he can probably either contribute right away, obviously on special teams, but also as a nickelback, and then they hope to be able to work him in as a starter. But it all depends on that knee, which has in it a torn ACL, a recovering ACL, and a dislocation.
Of course, the other piece of news, Josh McCown is going to be the starter heading into training camp. How much competition is there actually going to be in camp this year for that quarterback position? Even if you go back to last year when Brian Hoyer was kind of the starter going into camp, it was kind of his job to lose. Is that the case with Josh McCown?
Yeah, and just going over that really very quickly here, when Bull asked that question, I knew he was asking it because I interpreted it this way. He was asking, hey, is at this point in time, at this juncture, is Josh McCown your favorite to be the starting quarterback, the favorite to be the starting quarterback? And Mike Pettin said, I think it's fair to say that he is. But I think Mike Pettin was probably answering the part about, he finished his question by saying, going into camp. Well, he didn't mean, is he the starter for training camp? He meant, is he the favorite to start student? So I think that's what Pettin meant. But, I don't think he broke news saying, yeah, he's our guy. But anyways, I don't think there's going to be a ton of competition this training camp. I don't think it's an open competition. I think Josh McCown is, for all intents and purposes, going to be the guy. I think they've made it clear they feel comfortable with him starting the season. And, I don't think Johnny's going to be ready. I think he's learning the pro game and has a long way to go and has other things on his plate right now that he has to take care of. And those things are also time consuming.
I mean, don't you think that's the kindest thing they could do with Manziel right now is say, don't worry about anything other than getting yourself together and learning how to play in the league, not putting the pressure on him to try to win a job. I still don't understand why. I guess I understand why they won't come out in May and say he's the guy, but they have to privately be telling him that, I would think. Do you agree?
You mean that you understand why they would come out in May and not say that Josh is the guy?
Yeah.
Yeah. I agree with you. I agree that Johnny does need this time. It's a one-day proposition to try to stay clean and sober. And I do, I get a little leery of teammates saying, oh my gosh, he is a completely 100% new man. He's different. He's changed. You know what? It's 2 weeks out of rehab. He's been with the team for 2 weeks. They're taking really strong measures to try to make sure that he stays on the straight and narrow. And I know, a few things more about that than I, really kind of have been able to write. But, they're working hard. Everybody involved with Johnny is working hard to try to help him stay clean and sober. And the Browns recognize that they can't put that kind of pressure on him right now. It's very difficult, especially in your first 60, 90 days out of rehab, to do what you're supposed to do. And they're all, just kind of waiting and seeing how this thing goes, and you can't put the kind of pressure on him right now.
Mary Kay, you just said it, this team is putting a lot of faith, putting a lot of resources into Johnny Manziel and trying to help him get right. Maybe all that talk of them still believing him in isn't just them being nice. Maybe they really do still believe in this guy. Do you sense that?
I do think that there are people in this organization that believe that if he is focusing on football, that they can make something out of him, put him on the field and get him to be a successful quarterback. There's people in the front office that feel that way. There are, Mike Pettin says he feels that way. There's teammates that openly say they feel that way, such as Joe Hayden. So yes, there are people in the building that still believe Johnny can be a successful NFL quarterback. I've talked to people outside of the building that have serious doubts about that. So I think that the jury is still out. I'm anxious to see who Johnny is when he's focusing on football.
All right, that's Mary Kay Cabot, our Browns beat reporter. Thanks for the time, Mary Kay.
Thank you, guys.
Johnny Manziel, it's going to be interesting. If nothing else out of Manziel, and you want more from this out of your first-round pick, if he is right, he's at least a weapon. He's at least a guy that, I don't know, maybe you bring him in when your team's
a
inside
Manziel
the 10-yard
package?
line. Yeah, exactly. Maybe a little better than what they executed last year.
Yeah, well, it wouldn't take much to be better than that.
That's true.
I got an idea. How about a play where they send him over to the bench like he's leaving the field, and then he runs down the sideline for a pass?
I like that idea. I'm not sure if it's legal, though. We'll have to check with someone in NFL officiating. All right, let's talk Indians. They have a game coming up this afternoon. First pitch is at 2:10, and our own Paul Hoynes is in Kansas City, and he joins us via phone. Paul, how are you?
Good. How you doing today?
We're doing well, Hoynesy. All right, Corey Kluber's on the mound. Are the Indians finally going to get this guy a win? I know he hasn't really done his part the last couple of starts, but are the Indians finally going to get Corey Kluber a win today?
Well, that's $1 million question. He's 0-4. This is his sixth start. I think he's pitched a couple times early where he really pitched well and they didn't score. The last couple times out, he's got knocked around a little bit. They've scored some runs. He's lost. Terry Francona was saying it's probably a result of two things. One, him trying to be perfect and knowing that if he gives up a run with this offense, which is challenged to score runs, it's going to put him in a hole that they won't get out of. And two, he hasn't been pitching inside enough.
Paul, it's Bud. Which of my two preseason predictions in your mind has the best chance of coming true? Kluber winning a second Cy Young, or the Indians winning 92 games and the division? And you're allowed to say neither.
Yeah. Bud, I think that Arizona sunshine got you when you were making those predictions.
No doubt.
I'm not sure. Right now, it's if you look at, I think Kluber probably had the best chance. If you look at his start last season, it wasn't, wins and losses were a little different, obviously, but the rest of his numbers are pretty much the same, in line. He kind of started slow and then picked up speed. So I think today is going to be a big start for him. We'll see, kind of which way his season is headed.
Hoynes, you look at Carlos Santana, and this guy he just goes against all the norms. He's not real big for a first baseman. He's not really your typical number two guy because his average isn't high. He's a power guy, but he gets on base a ton. But have the Indians kind of figured out where to put him now in the lineup, sitting him at number two behind Jason Kipnis?
I think it's, kind of the mother, what necessity is the mother of invention, or whatever that is. I probably got that backward. But the lineup, just they were struggling to score runs so much that I think they had to do something. And the first move was putting Kipnis in the leadoff spot, and Francona gave that a while to settle in. And then I think the second move was obviously moving Santana into the number two spot. And, it's got some nice results so far in these two games, so it's going to be interesting. And the good thing is he's a switch hitter, so he can do it against lefties and righties in the way Francona sets the lineup.
Hey, Hoynesy, speaking of the sun getting to me in spring training, I think it may have gotten to you, too, because we both agreed that Bourne looked really good, didn't we?
God, that's a shock to me that And I think, if that not only has he lost the leadoff spot, but he's been benched against lefties. I mean, it's just, that's a stunner because he did look so good in spring training. And, he'd done all the work in the off season with the University of Houston track coach. His legs were in good shape. He didn't have any problems. But, I don't know. The guy is, 33, maybe 32, 33. And you just wonder, has he lost something? Has he lost the big, the speed part of his game? I don't know. But it's certainly, that's a surprise to me. And I think, another thing, I think the Indians' bad start has played into this too. I mean, it shows, I think, a sense of urgency from the front office in Francona that we haven't seen in the past. That they feel like they've got to make some moves now. They're playing in a division that made where the other teams have made a lot of moves during the off season. They didn't make hardly anything, and they're getting passed by. And I think they need to do something. And this is probably the biggest way they can impact the lineup right now.
Hoynesy, what is it about Jason Kipnis in the leadoff spot? You look at what he's done in his 44 at-bats. He's hitting .318. He's walked 7 times. He had walked 2 times in the other positions in the order. He's even got 8 RBI, 3 home runs. So what is it about him in that number 1 spot? Is his approach any different?
I don't think so, Dan. I think he's, he was hitting the ball hard when he was hitting number 2 and number 3, or number 2. He wasn't having a lot of luck. But I think, he likes hitting leadoff. I think, and when he's going good, he's like most guys, he's a confidence hitter. When he's going good, he's gonna get better. And right now, he just looks confident when he stands at the plate. He looks like he's gonna do some damage. And we didn't really see that all of last year, and probably at the start of this season. He looked like a guy still feeling for it. And he looks like he's found something in the leadoff spot. Maybe, he just needed a change of scenery, perhaps.
Paul, what are your expectations for Nick Swisher at this point?
I wasn't, I think Swisher, they're probably going to ease him into the lineup as a DH. He's not in there today. He DH'd twice, the first 2 games of this series. Swung the bat much better last night. Got a hit the ball hard a couple times. You still watch him run, and there's some question there, and to me, and when you see him run the bases, you wonder just how useful he can be in right field. To me, I don't know how much ground he's going to cover out there. So I think right now, he's a DH. Maybe the second option is the outfield, but. They've got so many people out there, and Moss and Murphy and Rayburn and Swisher. I mean, I don't know how much longer you can keep a roster like that without making a move and getting a little more flexibility in there.
Paul, you mentioned Brandon Moss. He got off to that slow start, but as it stands today, after that homer last night, 241, 5 homers, 21 RBI. Are the Indians getting what they expected out of Moss now?
Yeah, I think so. I think, admittedly, he told us last night that, he was nervous at the start of the year, trying to, impress a new club. He started 0 for 13. He was striking, and, even after he started to come out of it a little bit, he was still striking out in half of his at-bats. And I think he's always going to be a strikeout guy. But you're starting to see a guy kind of settling in now. And, he's doing what the Indians thought he would do. He's driving in runs from the middle of the lineup. I think he's doing it against lefties and righties. He's never going to be a high. I don't think he's ever going to hit for a big average, but he's going to be a dangerous hitter, and they really need him in that regard.
All right, that's Paul Hoynes, our Indians beat reporter. He's in Kansas City. The Indians trying to win another series, trying to turn this thing around. If it's going to happen, it's going to happen slowly. Today would be a good start for the Tribe. Hoynesy, thanks for the time.
Thanks, guys.
See you, Paul.
All right, Bud, it's your turn.
Oh, it is? I don't have anything prepared.
Oh, all right. Well, it was great.
There you go.
Oh, there we go.
Well, okay. Well, in a late-breaking story Wednesday, the NFL found probable cause that Tom Brady and 2 Patriots employees had played a role in deflating game balls against league rules. Brady denied knowing anything about it and ridiculed the story back in January, saying, "This isn't ISIS. No one is dying here." I think we have one rendition of the Brady press conference. Yeah, there it is. Okay. That is not to be confused with the Mr. Science press conference in which Bill Belichick tried to explain how footballs exposed to cold could be underinflated naturally. But for some odd reason, not the other team's footballs, just New England's. The league spent 108 days looking into Deflategate, and my take was that Brady should be suspended multiple games in 2015, to which Shifty writes, it's called competitive edge, and that, quote, only Bus Shaw and the rest of old hags around the water cooler would think that deserved a game suspension. Well, a couple of things. We don't have water coolers here. And Bus Shaw, in addition to Bud Shaw, thinks it deserves more than a game suspension. I said multiple games. On the topic of Brady and Deflategate, Still Waiting writes, there's nothing like finding a person guilty without a trial, is there? Actually, there is something even crazier than that. Comparing a league handing down discipline in cases of rule breaking to the American judicial system. That would qualify. Finally, on the topic of Deflategate, Woody is back to say that if the Browns did what the Patriots did, the whole team would be suspended. Well, that's just not true. The league differentiated between Ray Farmer's text and Atlanta's attempt to affect the competitive environment by piping in artificial sound. The league isn't out to get the Browns, no matter what you think. Anyhow, how would we know? If the entire Browns team were suspended some years, we wouldn't know. Would they go, what, 4-12 instead of 5-11? Because football is the motor that drives this sports town, a story on Johnny Manziel moving from the 9 to Red Tail Golf Course prompted 2,379 comments, some of which even had something to do with Manziel. One reader used the occasion to go back and watch film of Manziel, presumably playing football and not spraying champagne at a spring break party. Bicycle Buckeye concludes that Manziel's footwork is so bad that, quote, it makes me wonder what Ray was looking at when he drafted him. To which Woody says, he knows what he was looking at. He was looking at Haslam. That sounds about right, at least to me and other old hags hanging around the prune juice cooler. Dan?
Well, one thing that came out of the Tom Brady thing was the equipment managers for the Patriots. I want to be in their group text messages.
Honest to God, me too. I also meant to ask Mary Kay whether Josh McCown has anybody on the equipment staff that he just happens to call the deflator.
Man, I don't know.
Now, people who want to say that they didn't catch Brady actually doing this, why is that guy named the deflator?
What was the one text? The only thing that's going to be deflated today is Tom Brady's passer rating.
Exactly.
These guys are great. They should have.
They should be on this show.
Yeah, they should. I would watch that show for sure. All right. Well, I don't know. The Browns. Again, we've talked about this before. Tom Brady, one of the greatest quarterbacks to ever play the game, plays with slightly deflated footballs. The Browns, who have never had a quarterback anything like Tom Brady, that we know of, have never tried anything like this.
That we know of. I'm sure, by the way, in saying that Brady should be suspended, I'm pretty sure that he's not the only quarterback who has game balls specified, you know, what he likes them to feel like and look like. Mark Brunell said as much when he was first asked about this in January, and I thought he had the smartest take of all, which was, when he played, nothing happened to the football that he didn't okay and know about. And I think the same rule could be applied to Tom Brady, or the same logic could be applied to Tom Brady at this point.
And the NFL is so strict about equipment and uniforms. I mean, guys get fined if they wear their socks the wrong way. And yet somehow the rule with footballs is, just bring your own, guys.
Yeah, bring your own.
Whatever you got.
And I think that stems from Breeze and Peyton Manning complaining way back when that they didn't, you know, they wanted to be at their best, and the league should want them at their best. So they were anxious to be able to get game balls prepared the way they had used them in practice. So I think it was put in for the right reason, but they may have to reevaluate that rule.
All right, Sports Insider, another one in the books. Thanks to Joe Vardon, Mary Kay Cabot, Paul Hoynes for joining us today. He's Bud Shaw. I'm Dan Labbe. Thanks for watching.